Yes, he's loud at talking. He's loud. Oh my, he's so loud. What's up, my people, and welcome to episode number 7 of Loud Talks with me, your host, True Loudy. That's right, this is a different format where I bring on guests and talk to them about their lives. What's going on in their lives, what's currently going on in their lives, and what they want to do maybe in the future of their life. Today, my guest is Ryan Syverson, a man who I met back in 2010 while going to school for my advanced personal trainer's diploma. He was also there getting his advanced personal trainer's diploma, and we hit it off. We were like, boy, we like each other. Let's be friends. And since I've known Ryan, he's battled chronic illness, chronic diseases, shit that just keeps popping up, won't go away. And he went to so many doctors, they couldn't give him answers, so he found them for himself. He now has a certification in functional diagnosis nutrition, as well as that advanced personal trainer's diploma. And he's going to the Wellness Academy code to become a wellness coach. So right after this conversation this monologue right here, we're going to get into the podcast, just so you know. So little tittle bit, I had the Zoom set up so you saw his face in the beginning, but we switch it to both of our faces so you can see both of us. So the beginning might be a little weird when you look at it, but that's neither here nor there. The conversation is what matters most. And boy, Ryan has a wealth of knowledge at his disposal. So I hope you get something out of this podcast. And without further ado, Loud Talks, episode number 7, Chronic Illness with Ryan Syverson. What's up, man? How you doing?
Not too bad, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I saw you were up a little late last night.
Yeah, it was another late night on the grind, my friend.
Yeah, that's kind of the story for those of us that are trying to do something other than what we're currently doing, right?
Yes.
It seems like you've been pretty busy. We talked a little bit just before this podcast started, and you were saying that you're working at AT&T. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was. I'd been there for 22 years, so I've been a network technician for them, and then I've been health coaching like as a side gig for about 3 years now, and then helping people prior to that with chronic illness and stuff like that. Just not officially doing it, so to speak, which kind of got me into doing it.
Gotcha. So you essentially, I know that you started your own business, and what exactly is your business? What's the name of it, and what do you do?
Yeah, so the name of my business is SubLyme Life, and so basically what I do is I help men or women, mostly women are mostly my clients now. I help them overcome fibromyalgia, Lyme disease, other chronic illnesses naturally, so they can have more energy, less pain, and start living a normal life, because that's something that most of them feel like they don't have. And I went through that myself. So, having that normalcy, the things that everybody generally takes for granted, having that taken away and not being able to get up and go for a walk outside or go to work even, or sometimes people just can't even really function because they're so exhausted and stuff like that. To be able to provide them tools and modalities to overcome that, to get back and regain that normalcy of life, is basically what my mission is to help them do that.
That's awesome, man. So what exactly is fibromyalgia? For those that don't know, and for myself, because I'm kind of like, I kind of know, but it's like one of those things you hear about, but.
So fibromyalgia it's an interesting thing. It's generally considered a diagnosis of exclusion. So if you go to the doctor and you usually it's like fatigue and pain, insomnia, a lot of like psychological issues. So depression, anxiety, these are kind of like a cluster of symptoms. And so you go to the doctor and you see your general practitioner, and they may prescribe you some anti-anxiety or antidepressant meds, do this, go to get some physical therapy for the pain, go to your therapist to work on some of the emotional aspects, and it just doesn't work. And so then you just end up bouncing from doctor to doctor, and you go, and before long, people are seeing a rheumatologist, a gastroenterologist, neurologist, and they can never figure out what's going on. Generally, their labs look fairly normal, and these people have a lot of pain. They're not able to sleep. And so after so many years for most people dealing with this. They're just, finally given that diagnosis of exclusion, which is fibromyalgia. And it's usually, there used to be the criteria, there are specific pain points, like trigger points in the body that would do that. And that's kind of what my story was. I bounced around from doctors to doctors and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And so they gave me the diagnosis of fibromyalgia, and it wasn't something that I was willing to accept. And so I just kept digging deeper and deeper for answers. And as I did, I started unraveling all these underlying issues, be it chronic infections, I had mold illness and all these other things, which then were the really underlying factor of that fibromyalgia diagnosis. And then as I started to slowly peel back the layers of these particular chronic infections and toxins in the body, my body just kept getting stronger and stronger. And when I say toxins, I'm talking like neurotoxins, toxins in the body, but I'm also talking toxic thinking patterns, self-limiting beliefs, and stuck emotions and traumas as well.
Yeah, it seems like, so for me personally, I've realized how much your mental state affects how you feel physically. And so I know that it's like this weird snake eating itself or self-fulfilling prophecy where, doctors will tell you that you're sick, but you don't actually have that illness, but then you start to show symptoms of it. And this is, I don't know, this is kind of why I don't trust doctors a lot of the time. Because it's like, they kind of know, they know what they're talking about, but they don't really know what they're doing. They're just, let's test this. Oh, that didn't work. What about this? Let's test that. Well, that kind of showed, so they must have this, but it doesn't show all the side effects. And it's almost like they just kind of throw, like blanket statements on things or blanket diagnosis, so they don't have to work harder to like actually figure out what the problem is.
Yeah, that's a big problem in the medical system. I mean, I think now, I can't remember exactly what the statistics are, but I mean, the level of chronic illness is so on the rise worldwide, but in the United States specifically. And the thing is like the Western medical model, our medical model here is great for acute traumas and things like that. But when it's something chronic, it can be really, really tough, because we're a society built on looking for quick fixes. We just want Band-Aids to fix symptoms, and we never want to dig deeper and looking for underlying issues, which are really, you might have some psychological presentations like anxiety, depression, you have fatigue, you have gut issues, skin problems. And, so you go to the dermatologist, they give you a cream for that. You go to the gastroenterologist and they put you on some proton pump inhibitors to lower your stomach acid. And then to help with your GERD or whatever, heartburn. And then you go to the neurologist and you get something for your like neurology, all these things are Band-Aids and masking symptoms, which then drives the dysfunction deeper into the body, and you never really get to the root cause. And so by the time you're in your 60s, you have this big pill bag of all these things that you're taking, because then this creates a symptom for this and that. And, if you look at it from a more functional medicine perspective, which is looking for, for instance, for me, like for a long time, I thought I had low testosterone. So, and I did, but, so it was like, do we give you testosterone to fix it? But at a functional medicine perspective, we'd be like, well, why is your testosterone low? Well, you have gut problems. You're not sleeping right. You have toxicity in the body. You have an infection. So all these things are going to downregulate your hormones. And so if we don't look for the deeper underlying causes, we're just chasing symptoms, and it's just a never ending cycle of trial and error.
So what would you say is one of the main underlying causes? Like, is there one that's ubiquitous among a lot of Americans? Is it like lifestyle choices, like not exercising? Is it diet? Like, is it like high inflammation in the body caused from other things? Or what would you say is kind of like the main cause of this?
Yes. So inflammation is definitely an underlying cause, but what causes the inflammation? And, a lot of times the inflammation is caused from a lack of cellular energy or a deficiency. So, Hippocrates told us 2000 years ago that all disease begins in the gut. And we're finding more and more now how much the gut plays an integral role to everything when it comes to health and wellness. And if, because you have the gut-brain axis, you have the gut-skin axis, and it really, and with the gut-brain axis, like inflammation in the gut can drive inflammation in the brain. And we're just finding more and more now that things like depression, anxiety, bipolar, all these things are issues of inflammation. And so if we can figure out what that underlying root cause is and start treating that or correcting that, that can make a big difference on not only your mental and emotional aspect, but you can start having more energy and less pain. But I would say it's more, definitely a lifestyle factor. Again, we talk about, we want, the convenient way, just, if I'm feeling bad, just give me a pill, but then that doesn't drive any actual lifestyle change. Are you sleeping better? Are you cleaned up your diet? And then we're looking now with the pandemic, with COVID, we're seeing all these people, specifically in the United States, they're getting hit really hard. But when you factor in there that like 80% of the population has some sort of metabolic issues, be it like type 2 diabetes or like moving in that direction.
Yeah.
It's no wonder that we're having such a big problem. And then I don't know if you saw this, but this has been kind of talked about lately now, is that Krispy Kreme's is giving free donuts if you go and you get your COVID vaccination. So what is that telling you? The same thing that's driving the disease, like Krispy Kreme is going to drive metabolic dysfunction, and they're giving people free donuts to get a vaccination. And it's really, that's kind of like, it's really disheartening, really.
Well, yeah, man, it's the perfect example of how our culture functions, and
Yeah.
it is really like, we want what we want now when we want it, and we don't want to have to think too deeply about our problems and how to solve them. We don't want to do any extra work. We're already overworked. We're already underslept. We already feel like shit. And when you feel like shit, it's really hard to try to approach your problems with energy and solving them, right? You're talking about one of the things is cellular energy production, right?
Yep.
So like, if you don't have this energy production, then how are you supposed to have the energy to go and solve your problems, right? So you're in this weird catch-22 situation where it's, and like so many people are, right? Where you're tired, you're depressed, you're anxious, and now you're supposed to go and take your time and energy and do all the research that you did, right? Where you were motivated by it, right? Because you had your own chronic illness issues, and you were like, oh fuck, I need to figure this out. What is it? And it drove you to the brink of like insanity almost, right? And you were like, no one can tell me what's wrong. I guess I need to do this myself. And you took personal responsibility, and you were like, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And I just feel like most people aren't wired that way. And most people, they would rather outsource the information and the medication and the treatments to somebody else and say, well, that person knows what they're doing. I'm just going to talk to them. They're going to give me what I need, and then I'll be good. Right.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, if you think about this is something I got from I'm drawing blanks here, but there's a formula, E plus R equals O. And this is how we take ownership in our life. So E is the events in our lives that we don't really have, or the environment, the external environment. We can't control the external environment or these events in our life for the most part. And R stands for your response to those events in our environment, but that we have 100% control over. And so if the events plus our response equals our outcome, that means we have an effect on our outcome. And so I always like to tell people too, that things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And so for me, when I got sick, I felt like I was kind of lost. I've always been super geeky and into like health and performance, and, being a personal trainer before I got sick. I was always looking for different hacks, supplements, this and that. And when my illness came along, it really forced me to, I was burning the candle at both ends. I wasn't really I was constantly looking for something like validation and something on the external to make me feel good on the internal. And by getting sick, it forced me to look internally, because everything that we want in our life is within us. The answers are there within us. We just have to ask the right questions. And so me getting sick and going through like the hell that I went through, I always like to call it was like a blessing in disguise, because it helped me find my path. It helped me appreciate life much more, and just really start digging for those answers and realizing, because just a bunch of shitty things were happening to me. I got mold in my home. I had to leave my home. I spent like $20,000 remediating. I had to file for bankruptcy. It was just a long, and I just couldn't figure out why all this shit kept happening to me. I'm just like, woe is me, like that victim card type thing. And then I started getting into personal development, and realizing that all the shitty things in my life is on me. All the good things in my life are on me. And when you can take that 100% ownership, it's so freeing, because you drive your ship. And as long as you start doing those things, you can totally change your life, no matter how shitty it might be right now.
Yeah, man. I think when you develop a concept of helplessness and you say like, everything that occurs to me is out of my control, so I can't do anything about it. The universe is just plotting against me. God hates me, whatever you want to say, right? We immediately, take away the idea that maybe we have actual control in our lives and can do something about the events that occur in them, right? Or at least our response to the events that occur in them.
Yeah.
I think response is the biggest thing, because you essentially, when you play that victim card, you condition yourself to be someone that, is not in control and doesn't accept responsibility for their part that they played. Now, obviously, there's things that are outside of our control. I think I'm a firm believer that extreme ownership is good to an extent until it's not. It's like it can be detrimental when you own up to things. It's at such a ridiculous level. Like, a car hits you and you're like, well, I shouldn't have been walking there. And it's like, well, no, you had a fucking crosswalk, dude. You know what I mean? The light was not green for that car. You had a crosswalk. It hit you. That's not your fault. You know what I mean? But there's so many other aspects of our lives that we have actual control over. But I think it's much easier to play the victim card and to make excuses for ourselves. And so I think that's really cool, man. And that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on, is because, I've dealt with my own chronic illness issues and just like health issues in general. And the crazy thing is, like I was talking about before, is once I started to accept my responsibility for the things that happen to me and gain ownership over, my injuries and my health issues. And I started trying to have a more positive outlook on life, dude. My body pain and my inflammation started to go down. Like I just started to feel physically and mentally better. And it's crazy, man. Cause like for me, all of my value, and I've talked about this on my Loud Thoughts podcast, but all of my value came from parkour. Like you were talking about externalities, right? Like these external things in our lives that we attribute value to, right? That like, and then once they're taken away, right? Like your ability to be like super strong, right? Because you played hockey and you were a personal trainer and you were like a Marine, which is also dope, by the way. We don't have to talk about that, but that's sick. And then, so like all these things, your identity got built up around like this, probably like this masculine man who was like, in control of his life. And then, stop me if I'm wrong, but like, and then these things fucking happened. And then you were like, oh shit, like, now my identity's been stripped from me and I don't know who I am. And now I feel lost. Right.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. That was a real big thing for me because my identity was built around, being a meathead, going to the gym all the time, playing hockey, being this, tough guy, trying to like that persona that I was trying to put out or whatever, being that masculine male and all those things were a mask for trying to hide a lot of the pain and issues. Cause I was dealing with a lot of psychological issues too. Like, I dealt with anxiety and depression, since my early 20s. And so again, like getting sick really kind of helped me look into that. And, when I was sick, kind of talked about like that black cloud that kept following me around. It was like, people were like, you need to go back to therapy and you need to do this. And I'm like, it's not in my head. It's not in my head. But, the saying is, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And so I was reading a book on Lyme disease and they talked about all these different sticking points. And they talked about one being mental emotional trauma and dealing with these emotions and like depression and stuff like that. And that was like, boom. And like people have been telling me that. So then that's when I really started digging into, I was going to therapy at the time, but that's when I started getting into things like personal development. I got into like Bob Proctor's stuff,
And who's Bob Proctor exactly?
Bob, he's a success, he's got multiple programs. I mean, if you search his name on the internet, you'll find, I did his Bob Proctor coaching. So it's all about, talking about the law of attraction, but it's just using our thoughts and like subconscious mind, visualization, positive affirmations, all these different things to start changing your life and really trying to reframe everything. And that's like, you can look at a situation and you can find all the shitty things that are in that situation. And that's the lens that you live through. And then when you have these negative thoughts and they just attract more negative thoughts. And so his thing and a lot of the other coaches, Kevin Trudeau was somebody I got into early along as well, was like, Kevin Trudeau talked about, you have this negative ball and it's really big because you're just thinking negative thoughts and attracting more negative thoughts. But if you can switch that and start reframing things and saying, okay, this shitty thing happened to me, but what's the good thing? What's the one lesson I can take away from this and make it more of a positive thing? And once you start doing that, then your mind, through what's called something called the reticular activating system. It's the reticular activating system works like this. So if you think about it, like you're buying a new blue Honda and you never saw any blue Hondas on the road before, but now you're buying one, you just bought one. All of a sudden you look and you see blue Hondas everywhere because our brain, our subconscious mind and all the information that's coming into us, we have so much information coming into us and our brain's got to filter out what's important to us and what's not. And so if we are telling ourselves a specific story, our brain is going to pull in all this information that's going to confirm that story. So if you're telling yourself you're shitty and you're this and you're that, you're going to pull in all those are the only things you're going to start recognizing. And so you're confirming that story. But if you shift that and you're like, I'm great, I can do this, then that reticular activating system shifts and it starts pulling in more information to support that story. And that's one of the big things I like to tell people. They call it like the cycle of outcomes. So we have our events, then we have our thoughts, we have our feelings, and we have our actions. So an event, when we talk about the E plus R equals O, so an event can happen. And then if you have this negative story that you're telling yourself, so you tell your story like, oh, everything shitty has happened to me. Like I feel helpless, blah, blah, blah. So this creates that feeling of helplessness, hopelessness. And then that feeling is what drives the action. So now you're feeling hopeless and helpless and you're just like, fuck, I'm a victim. This doesn't work for me. So your action is maybe you just don't do anything. So
inaction. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then your event just gets shittier. But if you change the story and you're like, okay, this happened to me for a specific reason. What if I change this? Like I'm strong, I can overcome this. Let me shift my thought. That gives you more of a feeling of empowerment. And so now you feel your feelings change. So you're not having those negative feelings. So then that drives a more positive action, which then influences the events and it just creates this cycle. And so you can break that cycle in two places. First is the stories we tell ourselves. So we're constantly, our subconscious mind is constantly listening to us, always, our negative self-talk or whatever, or you can change it by the action. And changing the action is quicker, but sometimes it can be harder because, I'm reading a new book called Why We Change. It just talks about how hard it is to change because we know what we want to do, but there's these driving forces. It could be negative limiting the beliefs and these things that kind of keep us stuck. And so changing the story can be real powerful as well.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Because I've actually noticed in my own life through cognitive behavioral therapy, I was actually able to break that chain in my reaction to events. So, when an event happens and then there's a reaction, the outcome is almost completely dependent on your reaction, right? And so the outcome is, you're saying is essentially, is going to also affect how you feel and your emotional response, right? So like that is kind of a piece of that outcome. And I noticed like if I could check a thought before it went down what I like to call the lubed up trench. Yeah. That is your neural pathways that are already developed, right? You have this nice little lubed up trench. It's like a little water slide, right? With a bunch of fucking petroleum jelly in that bitch. And if you have a thought at the top, like the thought at the top is like that. And then the ride is like even faster, and it depends on how many times you've had these thoughts because, our brain develops these wirings in a way to familiarize itself with our reality that we construct, right? and
Yep.
to familiarize itself with recurring events and things like that, because we need familiarity within our environments to predict things. So when something, that's why people have pet peeves and shit. Like, this one time I didn't like that thing, so now I'm never going to like it again because I had a bad experience with it, right? Taste aversion being one. You fucking eat a hot dog and then you get, food poisoning. You're like, I'm never eating a hot dog again. Your brain remembers shit, right? It remembers trauma.
Totally.
So like, it's the same thing with small little pinpricks of like, someone said something to you, like when I was a kid in school, I was like fucking off the wall, dude. So people would call me like a tweak or a fucking spaz, which I was. but like for a while, like when someone would call that after the first or second time, it started to fucking sting, and it's like, I am that thing. And then in turn, it becomes what we tell ourselves as well, not just this external stimulus coming in, but then the internal stimulus that we manifest based on our, what happens in our environment. Right. So I think it's really powerful to know, for people to know that are listening to this, all 10 of you. And then also just like for ourselves, right? It's like, you can actually change. It's possible. There are ways to create neuroplasticity within the brain, which is your ability to change your neural functions, the way things naturally occur. Your thoughts aren't reality. They can be if you want them to be. Like, your thoughts aren't the truth. And so the more you recognize that truth is subjective and that your thoughts aren't necessarily the truth, the more you can start to begin to change your thought patterns. And I think like that, I had an ex back in the day. Sorry to hijack this conversation, but
Oh yeah.
I was always super negative, and she was annoyingly positive. Let's put it like that.
Yeah,
like she wasn't a realist. She was just annoyingly positive. Couldn't say anything mean about anybody. Fucking just like would stop me in the middle of a sentence when I was like trying to roast on a movie and be like, dude, look at that guy's pants. Oh, like the 80s were so stupid. And she's like, well, it was the 80s. Like, it's fine. Like it's like, dude, have some fun with me. But no, she couldn't. But anyway, once I started this cognitive behavioral therapy, I was like, oh shit, like being negative doesn't get you anywhere. Like the outcome of being negative, it keeps you in place. You're running in place. You're burning your tires, essentially, right? And you never move anywhere because you're literally just sitting there stewing in your own thoughts, and you're adopting the idea of helplessness. So how can you move forward if you are giving up, right? How can you move forward if you're in a fixed mindset, right? You can't expand outward, right? You can't move that way or this way because you're fixed. So if you're fixed, you can't move anywhere. So the more you develop a positive mindset, or at least focus on trying to change your thinking into more positive or realistic thinking, rational thinking, then you're able to see like a much more positive outcome in your life. So your outcomes are better.
Yeah, for sure. There were. I just lost my train of thought there for a second, but
I totally took it from you. That's my fucking derailed that shit, bro. It's like, I'm good at that shit. Yeah, but you were talking about Bob Proctor, and then you were talking about.
Oh yeah, I mean, kind of going back to what you had said before about our validation of our own self-worth based on like outside presentations, like performance, for instance. So, I mean, it sounds like you kind of struggle with the same thing. For me, like my value and my self-worth is always based on how well I perform. Like, like when I was an athlete and played hockey, like if I didn't play well, I felt like a piece of shit. But if I played great, I was on top of the world. And so I was constantly on this undulating thing, like based on my performance. If I went to a party and I didn't like crack jokes, or I wasn't talking well enough to people or whatever, I was a piece of shit. Or if I was in the flow and talking to people and meeting girls or whatever, I was great. And so it was always this looking for this external validation of my own self-worth, when it's just such a flawed point of view that can really drive like a lot of the psychoses or neuroses, I should say, that I was dealing with, and like the anxiety and depression. So, and so when I got sick, not being able to, be that athlete, go to the gym, do the things that I want, really forced me to look at my identity and my self-worth and these things, and started shifting that. And that, again, looking internally, because I was a person too that I could never sit at home alone. I couldn't stand being alone with my thoughts. I either had to be around people, be out, or I'd have to be under the influence of something. I'd have to get high on, smoke some weed. I'd have to get drunk, something like that, because I just couldn't deal with my own thoughts. And so getting sick, I knew that I couldn't do, I couldn't abuse drugs. I couldn't do these things, and all these things that were helping me numb out like my own thoughts and having to sit in them. Being sick and having to deal with that and sit into them. That's really when I really got into meditation as well. It was just a really huge shift for me. And like all these old things that I've been repressing and pushing down in the past, like, friends that have committed suicide, other deaths of like friends, like close friends, and all these different things that I dealt with throughout my life that I've just been pushing down. Like, as males, we got to, make that strong persona. We don't cry, we don't do all these things, and we just kind of bury these things. But when we bury them, it's like this poison that's within inside of us, and it's constantly sapping our energy and blocking the flow of like chi energy through us, which then can make us sick. And so as I started dealing with these things, it made it a lot better. So there's a lot of self-growth going through my when I was dealing with chronic Lyme disease and mold issues.
So a couple things real quick. Did you feel like everything you loved was being taken away from you when you couldn't numb with those drugs and alcohol and things like that? Like you were like, fuck, I can't work out. Now I can't be a personal trainer. Now I can't do this. I'm sick. And now I can't smoke weed and drink. Like I can't even numb myself now.
Yeah. And that's, again, that's kind of like when I turned to meditation and other things. I'm like, there's got to be another way to do this. And, I've been in and out of therapy, since my early 20s. And I mean, anybody that's gone to therapy knows, I think I've been to like 25 therapists maybe in my life. And out of those 25 therapists, I've only had 2 that were any good. And it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, which is then, it forces us to look for other alternatives for us to do that. Like meditation has been one for me. And then something that I got turned on lately through my mastermind and some of the coaches that I've had is called RIM, which is, I might be getting this wrong, but it's called re-imaging imaginations or whatever. And it's using the subconscious mind to go back in. So you have a facilitator that kind of walks you through. They're not running it. Your subconscious mind is running it. And so you can go back and repair old memories, which then kind of keep us stuck and prevent us from moving forward. And that's been really, really beneficial for me. If somebody's looking into that, you can just look in, I can give you something you could put in your show notes. I'll send you the link for it, but that's been something that was really, really beneficial for me. And it has been for some clients as well, that as far as like mindset work has been a really big thing. So I know that was kind of a long runaround thing to answer your question. But
no, that's fine. So RIM is like is it kind of like when you watch TV shows and it's the person that's laying on the couch and the therapist is like, so tell me about this thing. Like, what shirt were they wearing? Or like, what color, blah, blah, blah. And they try to place you within that memory. And then you kind of talk to them about it, or is it solo?
It's solo. So they're, basically you get into a calm state, and then, so our body will store tension and emotion, these old stock traumas, which is, why our thoughts can really affect how we feel. And so kind of basically how it goes is you would, you get into a relaxed state, and then your imagination will just pop something up, and you you scan your body. So let's say, for instance, for me, it's like I always have like tension in my upper back, or I'll have like a foot problem or whatever. And so you scan your body, and then you have this issue like in your upper back. And for me, it would always be there. And then you kind of like, well, give this pain or this stiffness a shape. Is it color? And so for me, like a railroad tie, like a cold steel railroad tie. And it's just like, I felt trapped, like it was something was pushing on me. And they're like, okay, so then you move your imagination, your consciousness, or your awareness inside of that. And as you get inside of that, they're like something your imagination will pop up. So basically your subconscious is running it. And so for instance, one of the last sessions I did was me when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I was at the playground and some bully was on top of me, like punching me in the face. And I felt helpless because like he was kneeling on my arms. I couldn't do anything. And from that point on, like the story that I told myself was that I was helpless. I couldn't fight back. Like, I'm just going to lay here and not do anything. And after going through that whole process, essentially you go in and you have like a resource, you talk to yourself, and whatever you like story you told yourself after that event that may be affecting you later in your life. I would give myself advice. I would hug my 7-year-old self and, say what was going on. I'd visualize something different happening. And then once these things happen, it was like I changed my memory of that. And that memory will always be there, but the negative connotation that was carrying through my life has been released because I've let that go. And as I let that go, I felt like I could move forward more in my business because there was things that were holding me back, like these stories that I told myself based on how I got beat up on the playground when I was 7 years old.
Dude, it's so funny. That's really interesting you say that, because like I've recognized how recently through this path of just like trying to change my behaviors and thoughts, right?
Yeah.
How much of a factor my thoughts play in my life, and how much of my thoughts are not my own. Like things that people said to me or events that occurred. And then I thought I interpreted them a particular way. And then that became the story, right? Like for you, I'm helpless because I got beat up by some asshole. It's like, no, dude, that kid was just an asshole and probably like pushed you to the ground and you weren't expecting it. And then he kneeled on you and then you couldn't do anything. You know what I mean? It's not like you were both like, training for a fight and then like got in there and you got beat up, you know what I mean? Or something. Yeah. It's just like, it just happened. Right. And I think so much of what other people say or how we interpret events affects what we think the truth is. And then so we create these stories about our lives. And there's so much that I recognize with my own self in doing things. Like even with this podcast, I was like, oh, well, I need to do this first, or I can't do this, or like, I don't know how to do this. I need to talk to this person so that I can figure out how to do this, like not taking responsibility for like learning things myself and not needing help, like just doing things on my own. It's like a weird thing that I have issues with, you know what I mean? And like even with music production for me, like doing music, I'm like, I don't know how to produce. And it's like this excuse that I kept creating for myself. I don't know how to produce. So I just record and then hopefully some producer will magically come along and then my music will be released. It's like, no, that's not how that shit works. And up until like a year ago, I was doing that shit. And now it's like, I've learned to accept full responsibility for myself, And it seems like for you with your clients and stuff, you're like, can they even trust me to be like this guiding light or whatever when I feel helpless and I feel like I can't do things for myself, or like I might give up. And like, I don't know, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's so interesting how much of our past affects our present. And even though that shit's long gone, we've developed these ideas and concepts again, right? About who we are. And we get this fixed mindset about who we are as individuals. And that just limits us and our potential in the present and future, right?
Right. Well, kind of going up like that thought and like the fixed mindset aspect of things. So a big thing now is like genetic testing, and people get genetic testing. And so people that are dealing with long-term chronic illnesses are, sometimes they have like, the MTHFR, like, heterozygous or homozygous SNP, which is a single nucleotide polymorphism. These are genetic susceptibilities that make us, that can lead us towards being sick. But the thing is now through the study of epigenetics is we realize that our genes aren't fixed. They're just potential things that can happen. And we can influence our genes by the thoughts that we think, by how we live, the sleep we get, all these different things influence our genes. And so having a fixed mindset is like, oh, I have these genes. This is the way it is. I suck. I can never get better. And I think that's one of the biggest limiting beliefs that, my audience or clients would be dealing with, is that they just have this belief because their doctor told them, or they read it somewhere, maybe a friend's, like somebody else in like a support group, like, you have fibromyalgia, or you have this, chronic fatigue syndrome or something like this, and there's no cure for it. You're never going to get over it. And so if you accept that belief, then you just kind of give up and you're like, there's no sense in doing it. But then if you believe in a growth mindset, that you can change things, that your genetics don't determine your outcome, you can do things on your own to start moving forward. It's like failing forward, just because maybe one modality, one protocol or whatever didn't work for you, doesn't mean that there's no hope for you and you can't move forward. It's just a learning experience saying, okay, I learned that this one doesn't work. Let me try this. And then after you continue to move forward using that growth mindset, then you can totally make changes in your life instead. It's just really focusing on that growth mindset is huge.
Yeah, man. Because things are always in life, things are not going to work out. Yeah. Like in life, you're going to be wrong. A lot of the time, you're not going to fucking know what's going on. You're going to be wrong. And you're going to have to accept some responsibility in figuring that type of stuff out. And you're testament to that. Because like how many years did you spend trying to figure out what was going on with you?
So let's see. I first got sick in like late 2010, early 2011. And it was basically, things just started unraveling. Sort of like tearing muscles. I had insomnia, like body pain. I'd wake up and it would literally take me like 45 minutes just to roll out of bed because I felt like I was like the Tin Man, right? I was 35 years old, but I felt like I was 90 and I just couldn't move. And, so it was just like going to doctors to try to figure out what's going on. They run blood tests. They're like, you look fine. Your cholesterol's good. Your glucose is good. Like everything is good. There's nothing wrong with you. And so it's on to a next doctor and all these things. And, that went on for quite a while. And that's why I just started looking for answers, and again, I started digging in and finding, like, I looked into mold and mold was definitely a thing. But when I went to my doctor and presented, I said, could mold do this? They're like, absolutely not. Do you have like shortness of breath? Do you have this? Do you have that? I'm like, no. He's like, well, it's not mold. But then I started digging into stuff. Richie Shoemaker he wrote a book called Surviving Mold, and he's really big in the mold community. And he had all like there's specific lab markers that you can find out to see if these inflammation pathways have been or if you have high inflammation in these specific markers could be an indication of mold. And so when I started presenting this information to doctors, they wouldn't listen to me. These are like people from,
what a surprise.
Yeah. Because, and I don't fault them completely because they're, overworked. They got to deal with insurance companies. There's certain things that they're limited that they can't do. And, and just the model the way it is. But yeah, so for me, so that started 2010. I didn't find out that I had mold till late 2011. So then I started remediating my home to come to find out that, I spent like $20,000 doing my condo. I mean, they ripped out all the hardwood floors, the ceilings, the walls. I had mold everywhere. And as they were going to start patching things up, they're like, well, the unit below yours is also got mold. And that unit had been vacant for 5 years due to a foreclosure. And they said, so if we want to continue moving forward with yours, we need to fix that unit. So if you're not going to fix that one, there's no sense in moving forward with yours. And I'm like, I don't have the money to fix theirs. The condo association's not going to fix it. So I'm like,
oh my God, bro.
Yeah, so I'm like, you know what? I mean, my health is more important. And so I moved out of my house. I moved in with my girlfriend. I thought it was, was going to be, temporary. It turned into a longer thing. And then I ended up, her and I ended up breaking up and moving on. And after I got out of the mold, I started feeling better, but then that's when Lyme disease kicked in. And then that took me another 2 years to find out that I had Lyme disease after going to another slew of doctors and everything and being told that it's all in my head. And it was a very trying couple years. And so that got me to like 2013. And then, it was just systematically starting addressing things at a root cause, instead of chasing symptoms like adrenal fatigue, thyroid, low testosterone. I just started really digging into fixing the gut, fixing the toxins that I had in my body, fixing the infections. And then probably around 2017, that's when I finally came out of it. I was hovering around, I would say 80%, 75, 80% around that time. And I started dating again. I went out with a girl and she ended up breaking up with me. I was kind of heartbroken. I couldn't figure, I wanted to ask her why. I said, well, why'd you break up with me? And she said, well, to be honest, She's like, you just talk about your illness too much. And that was like, I was like, whoa, I didn't even realize that like these, like subconsciously I was doing this stuff over and over again. And so then that forced me to look again. I'm like, what am I thinking? What am I talking about? Because, when we think about things, the more we think about it, the more, we become what we think, so to speak. And so then I started, checking how I spoke to myself, checking how I spoke to other people, and, digging more again into that personal development. And as I did that, that bumped me from like 75% to like 90%. And then I've been above 95% now for the last 4 years in remission. And I continually searching for better health and wellness at all times to help myself, to help my clients, and just, give back and be of service to the rest of the world so they can kind of do what I did.
So I was just thinking there. I mean, that's awesome, dude. That's awesome that you took something so shitty and turned it into like, now you're using this information to help people. Because a lot of people would be like, this shitty thing happened to me. Fuck the world, but instead like, this shitty thing happened to me. How do I make sure other people don't have this same shitty thing happen to them?
Yeah.
Which is great. And I think we met in 2011. I want to say
2010, I think
2010. Yeah. Cause we graduated 2011.
Yep.
From from advanced personal trainer school.
Yeah.
National Personal Trainers Institute, where you learn about anatomy and physiology and nutrition and all these other things. And you and I were training partners for a good portion of, I think for like a quarter, for like 3 months, we were training partners, or 2 months or something. And so that's 2010. And I remember you were feeling like shit back then.
Yep.
And so it took like 7 years or something of you dealing with this stuff.
Yeah.
To finally kind of like come to the conclusion that you had mold poisoning, and then got rid of the mold in your life, and then found out you had Lyme disease, which is crazy, dude. Like, obviously, how do you know when the tick bit you? But like, you know what I mean? Like, were you out in the woods out east like ever, or like, because that's pretty common out there.
Yeah, well, Lyme disease is a new epidemic. They're saying, some statistics say like 430,000 new cases a year. It's like the newest epidemic, but it could be higher than that. But the thing about Lyme disease is it can actually lay dormant in your system for 10, 20 years until like a traumatic event happens, and when your immune system goes down. So for me, like, I grew up in Minnesota. I used to play G.I. Joe in the woods with my brother, crawling around, and like,
that's what's up.
I got bit by ticks all the time and didn't really think about it, but I was like a sickly kid. But once I got through like my teen years, I was good. And then I went along, everything was fine. And so my hypothesis is that I was good. And then all of a sudden, everything that happened to me in 2010 with the mold, and this is pretty common. I see this with a lot of Lyme folks, is that when you see Lyme, you see mold, and when you see mold, you see Lyme. And for me, I think that because mold is a major immunosuppressant, that it just dropped my immune system so much that, my body being able to handle the Lyme infection was no longer able to do it. And so it was like, their jail doors or their cell doors were open, and the Lyme came out, and it's like, man, he's got no immune system. Let's party. And then they took over my system, and then I had to knock them back down to get to my immune system to where it is today, to where it can handle it. So I think that happens with a lot of people.
That's crazy, man. I had no idea that it lied dormant, and that it just kind of hangs out until you're at your weakest moment and then strikes.
Yes. And Lyme is a fascinating bacteria. It's been around for millions and millions of years. It has 3 forms. So it can be intracellular. So it can actually go inside of your cells and persist there. It goes into a spirochete form, where it burrows itself into like connective tissue. And then it can go into a cyst form, and it constantly changes its outer surface protein. And that's how our immune system can find invaders, is based on its like, we have antigens to those outer surface proteins. And so Lyme disease can cloak itself and change constantly to avoid the immune system.
What, dude?
Yeah, it's like a super, super sophisticated bacteria. And then with Lyme disease, there's always going to come along other bacteria bacterial infections, parasites, viruses, because they all suppress your immune system. So now you could have like retroviruses, you could Epstein-Barr, because most, like 90% or more of the population has been exposed to it. And so we have all these viruses and these microbes in our body that we live symbiotically with when our immune system is working properly. But when you have mold and you have Lyme and you have other bacteria that are going to suppress the immune system, now you're susceptible to all kinds of infections. So somebody that's dealing with Lyme disease, it's never just the Lyme bacteria. You're going to have things like Babesia, Bartonella. You could have like different kind of parasites. You can have, there's so many different viruses you could be dealing with. So it's really just restoring that foundation of health for you to where your immune system can start, chopping down those things as you do some things that can help reduce the load of those pathogens as well. So it's a real interesting situation to be dealing with. And so many people are really, really messed up with it. And I just really want to do the best that I can to help them not have to deal with that.
That's fucking nuts, dude. I had no idea that. I just had no idea. Like the surface protein, it can change it and then it cloaks itself within your body. So your body's like, I don't know where the fuck it is.
Yeah.
I don't know what it can't like determine that it's like, dangerous for you, for your health to be like inside your body. That's so crazy. And
the thing is too, that's why testing is so hard for it, because if your immune system can't find it, you might not have the antigens to it, and finding, because it's really hard to find Borrelia, which is the actual bacteria for Lyme disease in blood samples. So it's really, really hard to test for. It's a really crazy thing. And then a spirochete, same thing as syphilis. So syphilis is a spirochete as well. And we know how that can be a nasty infection for, sexually transmitted diseases and stuff like that. So
syphilis is a fucked up one right there.
Yeah, you can just ask Al Capone about that one,
bro. Yeah, I mean that's why all those white wigs. That's why all those people wore white wigs and shit. Because they were all those elites were fucking each other, and then like a couple dudes were just like, better wear these wigs so we don't have to show our syphilis scabs. And then everyone was like, yeah, it's a good idea. Let's wear these white wigs, and that's how that shit got started, because of syphilis, man. I mean, yeah, it's gross, dude. Have you seen pictures of people's faces like from back in the day that like never got their syphilis treated, dude? Their face like literally rots off of themselves. Like their noses are falling off. Like there's a big business for prosthetics for noses and stuff, because syphilis eats away like your lips and your nose and shit like that. Anyway, it's really gross. But so you said Barbarella is similar. It's would you call it a spiralite?
Spirochete.
Spirochete. So is it shaped like a spiral then? And it and that's the burrowing
and it's
type
like
of
corkscrews into your and it really likes collagen, connective tissue, fat. So people with Lyme disease will be dealing with a lot of, because it will get in the brain, because your brain's mostly a lot of fat. Your nerves, so your nerve system, or the myelin sheaths, so your nerves are fat. Your eyes, so we'll get in your eyes. It can affect the heart and cause like Lyme carditis. Some people can have major heart issues. I've heard stories where people are going to need to get a heart transplant, but then all of a sudden they treat the Lyme disease and all of a sudden their heart goes back to working normal. And affects all systems, reproductive, your circulatory system, your nervous system, your gastrointestinal, like everything gets affected by it. It's really gnarly.
So does it like feed on those areas, like the fat or whatever?
The cartilage, the collagen for sure. So like the spinal cord, your joints. So what it will do is it's a lot like an autoimmune issue. And the more and more I look into this, and like a lot of my mentors find that any kind of autoimmune issue is generally an infection issue. So what will happen is Lyme it can manipulate your immune system to create inflammation. And so it's creating inflammation in the joint. And so the immune system will attack the joints. It'll break down the cartilage. And as it breaks down the cartilage, that's the food for the Lyme bacteria. And so it manipulates your immune system to break your own body down to feed itself.
That's so fucked, dude. It like tricks your body, dude. It's like, well, gonna eat yourself so you could feed me.
Yeah.
Yo, what the fuck? Monsters among us, dog. You know what I'm saying? Like monsters inside of us, dude. What the fuck? That's so crazy, man. And so that's what you got, huh?
Yeah, that's what I got.
Oh my God, yo. And so what kind of stuff do you do to combat that as far as boost your immune system? Like what's your immune system routine?
So the biggest thing, you got to start nailing down the basics of like, stress management. So that thing can be like breath work or meditation. That's a great place to start. Then sleep is going to be huge, but a lot of times when you're dealing with Lyme disease or a chronic infection, insomnia is a big thing because they create inflammation and they like neuro, like excitatory, like you're in that constant fight or flight. So it makes it hard to sleep. So sleep is important. Diet is huge. I can't stress diet enough. So like an anti-inflammatory diet is going to be really big because because that was one big thing for me. Like early on, like, this was like mid 2011, like I hurt my back like so bad. Like I felt like, it was in rough shape. I could barely get up. If I like even like tilted one way or another, like it just felt like somebody was taking a hot iron and stabbing in my SI joints, and it was brutal. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I went to chiropractors and all this stuff. And then I got into looking into diet. I like anti-inflammatory diet, like doing like a paleo type diet. So once I removed grains and dairy from my diet, all of a sudden that extreme pain in my back just went away. And I've had chiropractors tell me, they're like looking at imaging, they're like, you have the worst back I've ever seen of anybody in my entire career. Like, we don't know that you're going to be able to do this. And
bro, no, wait, what?
Yeah,
because so this to you?
Yeah, so my L5 S1 disc, this was back in 2011. They told me that I only had like 10% left. So I had the back of like a 90-year-old man. And they're like, you're not going to be able to work out anymore. You're not going to be able to do this. But here I am. I mean, I don't deadlift anymore or squat heavy, but I still work out daily. And, I don't have back problems for the most part, unless I do something like if I don't get enough sleep or I eat inflammatory, then I'll get back issues. But there's again, doctors telling us what we can't do. And I don't want to blame them because they're looking at imaging, and if it is the worst back you ever seen, you're like trying to tell somebody like, hey man, you might not be able to do these things that you want to do anymore. But I tend not to be somebody that likes to listen to what people tell me I can and can't do. So, yeah, so that was a real big thing, diet. And then after that, then it's like cleaning up. So people that deal with Lyme disease, mold issues are going to have a lot of detoxification issues, specifically like stagnant liver, bile. And so if you can't detoxify, these pathogens create toxins. They're neurotoxins, which then cause other problems. And so if you can't get those toxins out of the body, that's going to affect you. So you got to open up detox pathways. And then from there, after you're like supporting like the gut, you're eating better, you're sleeping better. And then you can kind of go in and you can start supporting the immune system with specific herbs. Some people choose to do like antibiotics. Really depends upon what how severe this infection is, and what people's thought processes are on that. And then these herbs can be, or the antibiotics will then knock down the bacterial count to where it gives your immune system a chance to start. And then once you get to a point, because everybody's like, well, can you get rid of Lyme disease completely? I don't really think you can. You just knock the bacterial load down enough to where your immune system is able to run the show, and it's no longer being run by these, the monsters within, like you said.
The monsters within us. Okay, so it's essentially like you're looking at diet first, right? So you kind of like tier it like that. So you go like diet, and then you go detoxify, right? Yep. And then it's you. Then once your guts like and your liver are functioning properly, all the other things kind of fall into place, like better sleep, and then supplementing with herbs to try to like So what do the herbs exactly do? And also, what are you using to detoxify the liver? Are there like tinctures that you take, or is there like
you can do things. So I like to think of it like a pyramid or like a hierarchical thing. So you have the base, the foundation. That's going to be mental, emotional work. You got to, because your emotions are like what's really deep within there. Because as you mentioned earlier, our thoughts affect how we feel on a physical level, and they can. They affect our cells, they affect our microbiome. So just engaging in negative thoughts that create stress is negatively impacting your microbiome or the bugs in our gut, which or that's 80% of our immune system is in our digestive tract. So if our gut's messed up, our immune system is going to be messed up. And so we're going to struggle with issues there. So, mindset things, sleep, hydration is really important, and like filtering water is really important. So, there's heavy metals, there's pesticides, there's drug residues and stuff in our city and tap water. So having a good water filter to filter out these impurities, because especially when you have a weakened immune system, diet, exercise if you can. So movement is extremely important for that stuff. So those are going to be like your baseline things. Then you move up and you're looking at addressing like the gut and like your liver detoxification. So liver, supporting that, there's all kinds of, you can do tinctures. There's other, herbs like, milk thistle. You can do something like there's a product called Tadka that I really like that really, really helps the liver, all 3 phases of detoxification. You want to use things like phosphatidylcholine, which is a phospholipid, which helps thin bile and helps bile move through. And then phosphatidylcholine is also a major portion of our cell membrane, so that helps with cellular health as well. And then you go from there and you want to start supporting antioxidants, your minerals, and all that stuff that might need support supplementally. You might need mitochondria support to help you bring your mitochondria back online. So our mitochondria are our little internal batteries within our cells. And if they're not working well, you're going to deal with fatigue and your immune system isn't going to be working. I could go down I could get really geeked out here and start talking about cell danger response and how our mitochondria can sense a threat in the body, be it toxins, negative thoughts, or like infections. And then what they do is the mitochondria will shift away from energy producing mode and they move into defense mode, which is like, whoa, if you think about it, like an analogy, what do you do if you live in Florida and a hurricane's coming? You put up boards, you put the sandbags outside. Well, that's what our cells are doing when they sense a threat. And so if that threat is still out there, they're still locked inside and they're not able to get outside resources to, replenish their energy sources so they can create energy for us. So we need to start working, to help with the mitochondria. And then once we start doing those things and the person's able to detox, they have a little bit more energy, then you can start addressing infections. I think a big problem is people instantly like, oh, I got a bacteria, let's kill that thing. Let's go to war with the bacteria inside of us that have been living with us for millions of years. And if you go and you start trying to kill things, and if you don't have your detox and drainage pathways aren't open, then the toxins that the dead bacteria create has nowhere to go. And then it creates those neurotoxins inside of you and you just feel like shit.
So interesting. So if you end up killing the bacteria even, and it can't filter out of your body,
yep,
then you just have dead fucking bacteria in you. And that becomes a neurotoxin essentially. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah. And so people, it's called like a Herxheimer reaction. So when the bacteria die, they release toxins within the body, which then create inflammation. And so if our body is not equipped or it's like backed up, like people get really stagnant liver and gallbladder and, or they're dealing with constipation. So they're not able to get the toxins out of them fast enough. So if you're killing, you're overfilling your bucket and your bucket's overflowing. And now you got toxins recirculating through the system and you feel like shit. And you're like, oh God, this is awful. But if those detox and drainage pathways are open, your body can then, that bucket has got an opening, a spigot at the bottom that its toxins are they're flowing out. And so that's really important as well. So like dealing with infections is normally later down the road for a majority of the people.
Gotcha. Just starting with the basics first, right? It seems like a very step-by-step thing, especially because that was a mouthful, right? Like there's a lot of shit that contributes to your overall health, right? And wellness. And because we live in the society and the cultures we do now, this modern world that we live in, a lot of these things that would naturally occur for us, that we might get in from our environment, we're having to go to the store and buy, and like fresh water, we've tainted all our fucking water sources. Like I go and get a 5-gallon Culligan drum now because the water source out here by me is terrible. It's barely potable. I mean, it's potable, but like, it's not good. Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
drink it, and I don't. So, yeah, it just seems like, it seems like it's a very step-by-step process and a step-by-step thing. And that's probably the best way to do it too. I mean, because like otherwise people get overwhelmed. I know in the past for me, a lot of the time is I feel like there's just too much for me to focus on at one time and I don't know where to start. And
Yeah.
I get discouraged because I'm like, I can't, it's like so hard to keep up with it. But developing habits over time is I think how you overcome that for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And I think that's a big with clients. That can be something that's really overwhelming. We need to do all this, but just pulling out gluten from your diet for the first thing, because gluten can be a problem for a lot of people, especially if you're dealing with chronic illness. So that's like one thing. You do that, and then you move on to something else, and slowly but surely you start chipping away, because habits, once it becomes a habit, like what do they say? You only have to do things until you don't have to do them anymore. I forget how the quote goes, but basically once it becomes a habit, you don't have to do it anymore because it's more automatic.
You don't have to think about it,
Right.
Like,
right.
oh, I got to do this today, or like, you know what I mean? Oh, I have to do this today. It's like,
Yeah.
for sure, that actually makes a lot of sense. I agree with that too. I've implemented it. Like it's like something like 3 weeks to a month of just like doing the same thing every day, and like
Yeah.
I don't have to think about it. It's like automatic. Your body goes into autopilot, and it's like this is what we have to do. So, well, I know that you got to get going pretty soon here. So, why don't you go ahead and plug yourself? Any last words from you? Any words of encouragement for those out there that may be feeling sick as fuck, and not like in the good way, like that was sick as fuck, bro. But more like I feel like shit on a daily basis.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're dealing with any kind of, issues health-wise, I mean, just know that that's not your destiny. You can change things. Remember the equation E plus R equals O. So you can't control all these, shitty events that may have happened to you, but you control your response. And so when you change your response, then you control your outcome. So just taking ownership of it, start doing things slowly but surely. If somebody tells you that, you can't get better, that's not true, because that's what I was told. And I'm living proof that that's not the case, that you can overcome these things. And then just, start focusing on the basics, things that you have control over right now: your diet, your mindset, the things that you put in and on your body. So personal care products can be really toxic too. Filtering water, doing these simple things to start changing things. Look for somebody that focuses on functional medicine. If you'd like to speak to me, you can find me on Instagram is the social media that I'm most active on. And it's Ryan_Syverson. So RYAN_SYVERSON. Or you can look me up on my website at www.SubLyme, and that's SUBLYME life.com. And I'd be happy to chat with you and see if there's anything that I could do to help you.
Awesome. I just understood why you call it my SubLyme life now. That's funny. That's clever. I was like, wait a minute. Hold on a second. Yo, man, thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm glad I got a chance to catch up with you. It's been a hot minute, and definitely want to do this again and, have a longer chat, pick your brain a little bit more about some other stuff too, and hear about some of your other life experiences. So thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I always love chatting with you, man. And I'll be happy to come back on whenever we can get together and do this again, my friend.
Hell yeah, bro. It's going to happen. And thanks everyone for listening. Much love, and I'll see you on the next one.
Peace.
Peace.